you're
I got the easy
busy
job.
as well. You've been busy as hell lately, so I appreciate
Yeah,
it. Yeah, it's a lot of work. I know what you're doing. It's a ton of work. So, the fact that you can spare an hour, a little bit over that, for this episode to help raise money is much appreciated. So guess what? We've raised about $3,000 so far, and
awesome.
definitely maybe more than that. I'm not good at math anymore. My mind has has deteriorated after 4 or 5 hours of this. So I think we got 1,000 earlier, and then another like 400, and another like 100 or 200. So we're at 2,000 something, and that's another 2,000. So we're almost at 4,000. That's where we're at. So that's pretty awesome.
Amazing.
Folks, if you're able to donate, check out the QR code with your phone or go into the chat, and I will paste the link to the donation form. As soon as I find it, I am not set up right now.
I'm gonna
So
do that too. I'm gonna pull that QR code up right now, and I'm gonna donate later as well.
yeah, thank you, folks. I really, really appreciate it. And today we have Ryan Scott with us, who is pretty damn awesome. He's got all the X's on his names. I like to joke about that because it's just damn impressive. Let me just say that, okay? So you're like DoorDash, Palantir, Airbnb, and some startups as well. So it's pretty damn cool. And I think the most impressive thing in my mind, I'm gonna finish tooting your horn in just a second, is that you found most of these places when they weren't that big. And I think that's the hard part because, it's easy to say, oh, I'm going to work at a Fang or like Airbnb now. But, if you're going for, say, DoorDash or Palantir when they were much smaller and we weren't really sure if they were going to be big or not yet, that's a lot harder to identify. So definitely wanna explore that in this conversation.
Sure.
And also, you had a, what, why don't we do with introductions first? Because maybe some folks don't know you yet, but tell us about yourself.
Yeah. So you already did a great job introducing me. My name
In
is
the
Ryan
worst way
Scott.
possible.
I know. Great. The bar is so high now. My name is Ryan Scott. I've been a designer for about 20 years. Actually, May of this year is my 20th year anniversary. I've done brand design, graphic design, uh, moved into product design from web design because I've kind of done the whole gamut all the way going back to like the Flash action scripting kind of days. And worked at a bunch of those companies that Hang mentioned. I think one thing that's different about my background is I actually got my MBA from Berkeley a number of years ago. I have gone in and out of really different types of jobs, from being those like kind of very pure product design type roles to when I left Airbnb, I went and ran a nonprofit of 200 people for a year, and then started my own business recently. Teaching designers the business skills that I found super valuable in my career that helped me elevate my career. So that's my current focus, and it's been a wild ride, and I'm happy to dig into it and provide advice on whatever is valuable.
Yeah, we got so many interesting topics to go through with you. So there's definitely product strategy for one. There's the, what is happening in the current market, the macroeconomics that's affecting design hiring and the requirements that we're seeing and how that's changing. And there's probably like, how do we pick companies that we want to work at? I know we did the whole company ranking, tiered ranking list a while back that kind
Yeah,
of
that was
like,
fun.
that was fun, right? And I think your ability to choose those companies is like a pretty cool skill set to have. But yeah, folks in the comment section, let us know what you're interested in. We'll try to steer the conversation to that direction. And of course, please donate if you can. I left the link in there. You might have to copy and paste it because LinkedIn strips away the hyperlinking option for live chat because they're evil like that. But yeah, man, I mean, like you gave a Maven Lightning talk yesterday, right? Can you
Yeah.
can you like give us a brief overview of that? Because I couldn't attend, unfortunately, but the topic sounded really interesting.
Yeah, no worries. So I am really I've always been fascinated in this intersection of business and design. I really think that business is what gives design its definition in a lot of ways. And I think my perspective is that designers are accountable to the user and we're accountable to the business. And we're always balancing those things. And that's the job. That's the most difficult part of what we do, is trying to balance those things. And in a we have to compromise. We don't like to do that all the time. We want to be more user centric, but I'm a big believer in that balance. And that's what kind of got me interested in I guess going even further back, I had no idea how I was going to pay for college. And so I started doing freelance design when I was in high school, and I just loved it. I loved the puzzle of it. And I realized I could make money at it and pay for school. So out of necessity, it kind of just became something that I fell into. So for me, then I started doing freelance and was doing like my own little freelance agency for like 10 years, paid my way through school. And so for me, design and business have always been what I've done because I was like 16 when I started doing this. So that I've kind of just grown up doing design and business at the same time. Uh, Getting back to like the lightning lesson. So, going and getting my MBA from Berkeley, I realized there were so many things that I felt as an experienced designer that I didn't have the language to articulate. Like, what is it that business is doing? Why are we prioritizing certain things? Why are certain projects on my plate? Why are those projects so urgent? Why suddenly are they not so urgent? Like, what the heck is going on? And I wanted to kind of understand the genesis of all the work I was doing as a designer. I wanted to dig into that. So I went to Berkeley and took many classes that were not particularly helpful as a designer, like accounting. Took 10 weeks of accounting. Even the accounting professor was like, so accounting is boring. And I'm like, well, man, you're not even selling it to me. So took some classes. So like, okay, checking the box here. But then also learned a lot of really valuable things about how the world works and how businesses work and how I operate within a business. And so my lightning lesson was on kind of this intersection of macroeconomics and how that's affected design and design hiring. And basically that, my kind of thesis was that the pandemic was like throwing a rock in a pond, and it creates these ripples across the whole economy. And the health effects of the pandemic have subsided, but we're still seeing this rippling impact economically that's changing how companies are hiring. So you have, you want to stimulate the economy. When something like a pandemic happens, you lower interest rates so people have easier access to money. Then people spend money like crazy. Things get a little too crazy. People are spending a lot of money while there aren't as many goods to spend money on because factories are shutting down and supply chains are disrupted. So everything becomes more expensive, which is what we've all been dealing with. And I yesterday asked, has anyone changed how they spend their money, how conscious they are, what they spend their money on? And every single person's like, yes, in the last few years, I've absolutely changed how I spend money. And the thing is, businesses are the same way. When you've got easy access to money, you behave differently. When that easy access to money goes away, you behave differently again. And so that's where we've seen this like rise in hiring. And then this fall in hiring, I think comes down to that money being very accessible and that money then becoming less accessible. And so I think that kind of paints the picture of why the tech industry is the way it is and kind of the environment that designers are facing at the moment has a lot to do with that. And I don't think we have a lot of context generally in the industry about that. So that's what I wanted to kind of bring to designers.
So we're definitely seeing fewer headcounts for designers across the board, and it's a lot more competitive if you're looking for your next job, and layoffs are still going crazy here and there. How does that affect the job hunting process and really just like the kind of skill set that hiring managers are looking for? Because it doesn't feel like they're just asking for better versions of a designer. They're not saying, oh, you got to be a better designer, and like you need to have more years of experience for one, right? Because that's not really happening. It's not like they're saying 5 years ago, they're saying, okay, if you have 5 years of experience, you're a senior and we want you. And now it's like 10 or 15 years of experience. Like it doesn't feel like that. It still feels like the same number of years of experience, but their requirements are different. And I'm kind of curious, like how does that tie in with the macroeconomics?
Yeah, I don't really weigh like years of experience too heavily personally, because what you're saying is exactly right. It's not just like the bar raised, it's the bar shifted. And years of experience has always been a proxy for your capability to do something, right? And so really the capabilities have changed. And so that's no longer the right proxy. They're looking for different skills. So one thing I really believe, and I spoke about yesterday, is that businesses, when money is less accessible, want to be more specific with their spend, want people to be more accountable with their spend, which we all are too, right? As things became more expensive, we're all budgeting probably differently. We're all spending less overall. We're all trying to make sure we're really spending on the right things that provide real value to our lives and cutting out any like subscriptions for streaming services you don't use anymore. So businesses, I think, operate in the same way, that they want to really know they're getting the most bang for their buck. They really know they're, getting someone who can solve a specific problem in a specific way and onboard really quickly to provide value right away. And if you think about the persona of the hiring manager as a general bucket, we can dive into specifics if you want, but I think these people also are like, have seen a bunch of layoffs, are in a tricky managerial position, and they might have very limited headcount. That person needs to hire someone who's going to be a rock star and solve this thing right away, and who's going to be a low risk hire. And so that's probably going to be different for every company. I really do believe that companies are going to want people who have solved similar problems before. And so the example in my lesson I gave is, I used to work for Airbnb. Who would I probably have a better chance of getting a job with, like Target or Booking.com? Probably, I would imagine Booking.com, because I've solved extremely similar problems. It's a marketplace. It's in travel and hospitality. They're like a large organization that's sophisticated. So if we look at the scale and stage of the company, we look at the problems the business is always trying to face, which is the problems the product is always, trying to solve as well. I'm a more one-to-one match for Booking than I am for Target or like Anthropic or something a totally different type of business. So I think that that's what we're seeing is businesses being more specific about the type of person that comes in and having a more specific one-to-one match to that experience before. Doesn't mean you've done the literal project. Like I did booking flows at Airbnb, therefore I must go do booking flows at Booking.com. Although I'm sure they would be thrilled with that. But I think more one-to-one that you can get to a role and match that and target those companies to begin with, the better shot you have, because they want to be more efficient and they want to be more confident. And someone who's done it before is the person who's likely to be able to do it again.
So I totally see that, right? Like they want you to solve the same exact problem that they currently are facing. And that's the lowest risk way of approaching it.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I also feel like the kind of skill set they're looking for, like the raw skills in terms of whether you can do research versus UI design, is changing as well. And so it's kind of funny that you compared luxuries like Netflix to like, in a way, to like user research.
I wanted to give an example. I don't mean to make those things similar to each other. I want to give an example of like the way that people would evaluate something in their personal lives.
Sure,
I've definitely like purchased food differently, right? I'm like, all right, avocados are $3 a piece. I'm not going to do that today. But I do think that does speak to something of, and what you're getting at, this kind of answers both your questions, is that companies that were less design mature, and the reason we see a shift maybe from strategic design towards visual design is that those companies were already kind of maybe on the edge, and what they think of designers as doing is designing, which is pixels largely in their mind. So you see this big shift from like thinking towards pixels and kind of a loss of design maturity across the board, where it's like, well, we have the PMs, they can think through the problems. The designers should make it pretty and then make sure engineering knows what to do. So I think that that's some of the reason of like, they are saying the nice to have for a designer is them being part of the process and being strategic. The core of what we need a designer to do, though, that no one else can really do yet until everyone uses AI tools and neutralizes this advantage that we have, is the tactical, hands-on, pixely design work. That's stuff that other people don't want to do or can't do. It's easy to just delegate that specific thing. And then to the point earlier, it's the specific skill set we definitely can handle and should all be capable of doing. And so if you want a specialist to focus and do something they can deliver and not have a lot of redundancy, just like get them to knock stuff out, they're probably going to shift people over to visual design focus, and you're going to laser focus them on that for a while, which doesn't feel good as designers because we tried to gain the seat at the table and it feels like we're losing that probably a little bit right now. But I think that like seeking of efficiency is where some of those things come from.
Andrew says sad. I think we all feel that way right now about the current situation.
I mean, one of the other points I brought up, Andrew, is what people I think are looking for, and Hank, I'm really interested in your perspective on this, as I've been noodling around this for a while, is what I think people are looking for when they're hiring, and what actually makes you successful when you get on the job can be different things. So companies are like, I need visual designers, I need visual designers, I need visual designers. And I love reading like Tom Scott's, posts on LinkedIn. It's like, companies, stop it. Like, you need people who are strategic thinkers. I think that I've seen people like the bar for visual design go up for sure with hiring, but the people that I work with, and the designers I've coached and the designers I've taught through my courses over the last year or so, The ones that come back to me and have had a lot of success and are getting raises, are getting better jobs, are getting promotions, are getting pulled in strategically to high visible, high value work, are the ones that can relate their work back to what the business is getting for it. So I don't think that there is this, I don't see a lot of like CEOs saying, if you have a strategic idea and you're a designer, like, please shut up. I don't want to know how to make more money. I think that designers don't know how to talk that language often. And when they do, a lot of C-suite executives are like, whoa, you're asking about success metrics. Whoa, you're asking about our business strategy. So it's doing those things isn't part of our brand. I don't think people know to ask for it. I don't think they know that we are interested in it if we are, or can deliver it if we can. And so I've seen a lot of designers like start to speak, change the way they speak, change the way to describe their work, and they're getting jobs at a faster rate. They're getting promoted at a faster rate. They're getting pulled into more strategic projects at a faster rate. So I think there are companies. I know Debbie just came on and was talking about, like, if you're in a company that's like, hostile towards design, you're going to have a hard time of it. I think that's true. I kind of question what percentage of companies in the industry is that. I think there's like a bell curve where there's companies that are like very pro design, like Airbnb and Apple, that are like design led. And that's a very small minority at the beginning. And there's a group at the end that are designers, like, whatever, just make the pretty shit. We don't want to hear from you. Stay in your lane. I think there's a lot of companies in the middle that are kind of ambiguous. I call them like design question mark. Like, yeah, we have designers. We think they're valuable. That's why we keep hiring them, but we don't really know what to do with them, what they really do, what they can deliver, or how to operationalize them in a way that's going to maximize their value. And when they do deliver a lot of value, we don't recognize it because we're all speaking different languages. Mm-hmm. So my belief is, yes, there are those hostile companies and it is a struggle. I think a lot of companies are just uninformed, and a lot of non-designers don't know what to ask or know what to look for, and designers don't know how to communicate. So everything just gets lost in translation, and it's not necessarily a hostile act. It's just we all come from really different backgrounds.
I agree with that. I feel like a lot of times it's not just hostility, it's more ignorance. But that said, though, there are definitely hostile companies out there, or hostile CEOs that
or
do
PMs,
not.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they treat design as kind of like a service provider. Yeah,
I've been there.
And if you want to speak their language, they're just like, hold off. Like, this is my realm. I don't really need you to I don't need an incursion here. So just kind of like go back to your area, keep doing the work that, elevates my standing in the org. So yeah, it's tough, but I agree with you 100%. Like there's a key difference between the work that gets you hired versus the work that elevates you in an organization that gets you promoted. And I think a lot of it is due to the kind of problem you're trying to solve from the other side. So hiring managers aren't really seeing it as, how am I solving this current business problem that I have? And while that is the very North Star goal, they're just so preoccupied with the current problem, which is, how do I fill this headcount? And how do I deal with this?
What's going to get this person hired, right?
Yeah, I have like 500 applications. I need to look through it. And how do I quickly get through that without just wasting my entire day on this? Because I don't really have time to do this when I have 50 other responsibilities. So they tend to either delegate that, and that causes its issues because of loss in translation as you delegate this to most likely a non-designer, but also the fact that as you're so focused on this, you're not really focusing on the real problem anymore. And I think that actually creates a lot of dissonance between what you're really trying to achieve and what ends up happening. So yeah, I see that.
Yeah, it makes it hard for those people that, even if those people are like upskilling in visual design and passing that threshold, which I do encourage. Like, I do think, if we've focused so much on strategy, we've lost track of some of our skills when it comes to like the core competencies of what design is. Then yeah, we should raise that bar, and we should be able to meet that. But I do think like there are people who will be fantastic visual designers, get hired in, and then in 2 years being like, why am I not getting promoted? I got hired to be this visual designer and I'm doing that really well, but why don't people see my value? And that's what I worry about, those people who are getting hired right now. I think a lot of people are like, why am I not getting hired? And they're very frustrated. I think the people who are getting hired are potentially set up to be very frustrated within a couple of years. They have a paycheck, which is huge, and a lot of people don't. And that's that is a huge challenge that we're working on right now. But I do worry about a couple years out, like those people getting hired for their visual design skills. Like that's, I don't think
Yeah.
is the thing that's going to sustain them at that business or help them continue to be successful at the business long term necessarily. Or it's not the only thing.
Yeah, I can see that. So, quick donation update. We're still at $18,136 raised, 70%. Folks, you haven't donated yet, please use the QR code or the link in the comments and give a suggested donation of $25 if you're able to afford more. That's very much appreciated. Tiffany and her family will make good use of this money to rebuild their lives, their home, their house. And this is just such an amazing thing that is happening in the design community right now. People are just coming together and just donating money, even during a pretty bad time in our field. So this is just incredibly touching. Please help if you can. And if you can't, please, either engage with the post, share it, spread it out so that other people can, get more eyeballs on it. And we can try to achieve our donation goal of $26,000, which is actually not a whole lot when you think about what they're losing, which is their home and everything that's inside of it. So please think of the families that could really use our help right now. Ryan, I want to ask a kind of a crappy question, and
okay, great.
I love crappy
everyone's
questions.
Everyone's like, can I ask a personal question? I'm like, sure, but I've never heard someone start with, can I ask a crappy question? So
It's a crappy
really
question.
Can't wait. I can't wait for this.
Okay, so I haven't done design in 2 or 3 years at this point, and then even just for the flyers, the graphics for this initiative, the donations and stuff, I've struggled mightily. I was like, this is taking me 5 times longer than I would have a few years ago, and this is hideous. I had to ask a favor from somebody else, can you just crank out some graphics for me? Appreciate it. And I just realized, okay, if I were to go in the job market right now, I would probably struggle so hard. What about you? Where do you think you would fit? What would happen to you, and what would your strategy be at this moment?
That's interesting, because I've been out of it for a year, kind of a little bit over a year running my own business. I haven't put this to the test yet. This is kind of my big career gamble that I'm doing right now. Is I've paused doing in-house work. I'm still designing. I'm still designing my courses. I'm still designing my website. I'm doing stuff for myself, but running my own business, it's a very small portion of what I'm doing. And so my big gamble is twofold. Do I have? I guess there's threefold. Do I have enough work in my back pocket from Airbnb, DoorDash, these places that I can still speak to, that still gets me some conversations? Also, am I building a network in the work that I'm doing now that would open doors that I wouldn't have had otherwise? And I'm teaching designers statistics, macroeconomics, stakeholder management. Are those skill sets, if I can come in and be a designer but also say look, I am going to up level this whole team around me and raise everyone up, and get them more engaged and get them to deliver more value to the business, I'm hope that that would be a positive response from businesses, from CEOs and founders. They say yes, we would want someone to come in and who would be able to make sure we do all the visual design stuff and bring this other extra element.
Right.
Have not tested that yet. And so it could be absolutely stay in your lane. Why would you try to up level them? Why won't you just do pixels? So we'll see. That's a big gamble. If I were to, I did see a job the other day. I was like, that's interesting. If I were to do that though, I would definitely have to look at my portfolio because I've not changed it for 4 years or something like that at this point. I'd probably want to polish up on my visual design skills, make sure the most recent trends I'm still capable of doing. The work itself, I feel is good. The presentation of the work in my portfolio, I'd probably want to focus on a little bit. And I would probably focus my whole strategy on companies that I have that have some commonality with. If it's AI or something, is probably I don't have as much commonality with some kind of those new things. There's certain industries I haven't worked on at all, don't have any real experience with. Even though I'm an experienced designer, I've not worked retail, right? I've not worked, at Target, doing e-commerce stuff there or something like that at that scale, at those types of businesses. So I would probably try to focus on anywhere as DoorDash and Airbnb. It's marketplace oriented, travel oriented, any kind of similarity that I can grab onto. Even growth stage companies. Like if there was a growth stage company, like, look, I was at DoorDash from, Series B to Series D and watch that thing scale like crazy. I know what you're going through and how to plug in there. And what you need to do as a designer to thrive and compromise and make design and make the business successful. So that's how I'd approach it. I'd approach it very strategically. I would leverage my network. I would make sure that my portfolio was perfect. It has to be perfect. There can't be typos. There can't be like weird password protected things, any kind of, I think designers lose a lot of their design thinking when they do their own websites. Like the amount of portfolios I see with like huge amounts of friction. They clearly don't know their audience. It's like, guys, these are all the things you're supposed to demonstrate, and you can demonstrate it in your audience being like, well, this hiring manager I know got 300 applications in 24 hours. They might glance at my website for 10 seconds. And the first piece you put on there is password protected. It's like, I understand why you have to password protect things, but don't put that to be the first piece, because someone's going to go try to hit the password protected block and be like, screw it, I'm moving on to the next 299 people there are. So I would make sure that the portfolio is really, really dialed in, because they're going to look at it. They're going to look at it really quickly. I don't think there's any silver bullet. I think, you and I have talked a lot about prestige, and I've got Airbnb and some of these companies, which is great. I think those are multipliers though, not like total unlocks. And just because I have Airbnb on my resume doesn't mean I'll definitely get the job. So I look at all of those things as great. I've got a wide network. I've got Airbnb. I've got some of these things working for me, but I'm still going to put in a lot of hours getting that portfolio perfect, getting the narrative perfect, tying back to the business results that I created as a designer. I want to make sure I'm hitting every single possible dimension to the best of my ability before going into this like totally crazy market that exists.
For sure. It's a lot of work. Every time I look at that, I'm just like, this is just so daunting. And I think for a lot of people, they just don't even want to get started on the portfolio as a result. We got a great question from Adam. Can you expand more on losing a seat at the table due to AI? From what I've heard, designers who learn to use AI can generate more ideas faster.
Yeah, I think multiple things are true simultaneously, and this is usually the case. When I was at Berkeley, it became a running joke of like, what is the right answer? And the answer in every class was always, it depends. Yeah. And so I think that there's two things that are true simultaneously. AI can make designers faster at their jobs. You might be able to produce pixels a lot more quickly. That might, if velocity and speed of execution is something the company really cares about, one designer is going to be able to do more work. They might then hire fewer designers, may make that job more competitive. But if you are that one designer and you're like, I use AI tools to go really quickly, that will probably give you an edge against other designers who are not using AI. At the same time, I think the real competition isn't designers using AI versus designers using AI. It's designers using AI versus a PM who thinks they can do it themselves, because they're like, produce icon, and it just does it for you. Why would you have someone spend 3 weeks and multiple rounds of revision doing all the icons if it can be like MVP good enough and just go out the door? And so I think that's where we worry about losing the seat at the table, is that PMs thinking like, look, I've got all these AI tools that can code for me and design for me. Why do I even need as many engineers or as many designers? Because I'm the one that's coming up with the plan, the strategy. I'm going to validate it. I'm going to assess the market. I'm going to test it. I'm going to ship it, and I'm going to design it myself. And so I can see there being some convergence between all of these roles in terms of like designers can use low code tools or, AI tools to code. PMs can come in and use these tools to produce designs. Designers can, engineers do the same thing. And we're all kind of melding into each other in some ways. I think the area where PMs have an advantage, where designers don't have an advantage, is the business thinking and the business skills. It's much more difficult to master those things or produce you have to have some learning in that, I think, to even use AI effectively. So I think the tactical skills are going to go out the window, or, to use Debbie's term, like be democratized, pretty quickly. So what we need to compete on and where we need to continue upskilling and investing in ourselves is the kind of strategic approach and understanding how we're doing the right thing. One of the examples I gave in my lesson yesterday was designers think the best way to discover a new product opportunity is just do user research. And we just do so much user research. And then if we don't have the access or budget or time to do user research, we're like, well, now what do we do? There's so many other ways, to do like competitive analysis, benchmarking, like look at the data you have already in the product, past experiments. There's so many other ways to find new and interesting opportunities of things to do. And we get kind of stuck because we're not familiar with those things. So I think that's where being afraid of losing the seat at the table is other functions coming in doing our job. Mm-hmm. If we think about our job narrowly as pixel pushers and we let other people frame us as that as well, those people are going to struggle, I do think.
So let's say I'm a designer with, say, 3 to 5 years of experience, like mid-level, maybe senior-ish, and I'm coming to you. I'm like, okay, I see a lot of things are happening right now, more so than, say, 3 to 5 years ago, where things felt like it was progressing more slowly. We had like a clear idea of where design was going to head in several years. Like we were dealing with, say, blockchain.
Well, we thought
VR.
we did.
We thought we did, right? We were talking about like VR, blockchain.
I
think the biggest thing back then was like, oh, what's a new paradigm if you're going to use metaverse stuff, right? And that's going to be different from a phone. But it was still easy to imagine from a design perspective. It's just like, okay, well, now you're in the 3-dimensional space. And we have some kind of paradigm in our mind to help us adjust to this new information paradigm, lack of a better word. And now it's just like, what does it look like? We have really no idea. We don't really know which part is going to be replaced, which part is going to be changed, and which roles are going to be merged or removed altogether. So I'm coming to you, 3 to 5 years of experience, and I'm asking, what should I be focused on so that I am gainfully employed in the next 5 years to 10 years? Any guesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I were to frame the question, I think we focus a lot on the tactical work, the tools we do to use a tactical work. Like when Figma was about to be acquired, everyone, wasn't that a thing a couple of years? Like everyone freaked out. It was like, no, Adobe's acquiring Figma. And because we attach ourselves to our tools. And what you're describing is we attach ourselves to our surface. So we have the tactical work we do, like pushing pixels, and we use Figma to do that. And we're doing it on a phone. And if any of those things changes, we're like completely disoriented.
Yeah.
The thing that doesn't change as much as human nature, right? If you look at like a book like 48 Laws of Power, the 2 books I like to recommend designers are 48 Laws of Power and How to Win Friends and Influence People. And what's really interesting, especially about 48 Laws of Power, is it's this kind of 48 laws to kind of live by in managing relationships. And all of the examples are historical from hundreds of years ago. The first one is like, don't outshine your master, which is like, don't outshine your manager. Like you want to bring glory to your manager so they don't feel threatened by you and fire you or nudge you out or something, which has happened to me. And then they'll give an example of like someone, some noble pissing off a king and getting put in prison and dying. It's like people have been the same. Human nature has been the same for a long time. And so I understand why, hey, designers, go study business it's too big an ask. It's too big a call to action. And so what's important is to break that down into like, go study accounting? No, probably not. Go study product management? Yeah, probably. What about sales, marketing, and negotiation are the ones that I focus on a lot through different flavors and what I teach and what I work on, because you're always dealing with people. You always want to understand like, what do they need? How can I tell them how I'll meet those needs? What if they're arguing against something? That's their position. What is their underlying interest, the motivation behind why they're asking for what they're asking? And how can I communicate with them and understand what that is, get to the core of that, and then give them a reframing or an alternative approach that works for us both better. Those are just basic kind of people skills and stakeholder management skills. And so I think, if the person were coming to me saying like, what specifics, skills can I learn from a design perspective? I think that's hard because it's a moving target, and the kind of general approach is be as adaptable as possible. If AI is coming out, like start investigating, be curious, don't get stuck. Don't think Figma is going to last forever. Don't think the phone is going to last forever. Like what are the generalizable skills that you can bring to the table as a designer? And then also think about the people being the underlying thing that doesn't change. People don't evolve that quickly. Humans don't evolve that quickly. There will always be, regardless of what tool you're using, what service you're providing, what surface you're working on, you're going to have to convince someone of something at some point in time. And getting good at that, that helps with performance reviews. That helps with launching more strategic projects. That helps with getting hired. If you know what the company wants, you can say, here is how I'm going to deliver that for your company, and you can make a pretty compelling argument about that, that is going to help you get hired, beyond just having done a specific project on a specific surface. So that, I think, is the more kind of future-proofed skill set that I recommend. I don't know if that's answering your question if you're trying to go for like specific design examples, but I try to abstract away from it because those things are so variable and they change so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting that the skills you're describing are actually a bunch of the skills that many designers have currently, and they're struggling to find jobs because a lot of it is just user research in many ways. It's trying to understand the motivations,
Yeah.
the pain points of a group of people that you're designing for or you're working with. And for whatever reasons, it's one is harder to do so in the job hunting process, but also even if you understand it, being able to execute on it is also very difficult. So they might just want something like we want somebody who is really, really good at pushing pixels.
Yeah.
And while you understand what that ask is, being able to act upon it is a little bit different. So it's
Yeah,
tough.
I think that's true. I've dealt with companies like that before I started my own business. I decided I kind of ran an experiment, and I started doing some business consulting with some startups. I started applying to jobs, and I started kind of exploring, should I run my own business? And I wanted to see which of these felt right. And I
Mhm.
didn't have a instinct necessarily. I felt like one of those three paths would be interesting to me. And as I was applying to jobs, I was definitely like trying to apply to some jobs. And, I convinced like a head of product, you don't want to hire me as a senior product designer, or it would have been like a staff or something at the time. You want to hire me as a head of design. You want to have someone come in here, and yeah, I'll be a player coach. I'll push pixels for a while, but it's with the intent of like managing those designers and growing this team. And
Right.
I got all the way up to the CEO, and CEO was like, yeah, we don't need that. Like, it's okay for designers to just report up to product, and we just need people to come in and push pixels. And that's fine. If that's what the company needs, that just means it's not a good fit for me. And I tried to sell them on an alternative to what they wanted. And that's a long shot to try to say, well, CEO, you don't really want this. You actually really want that. The probability of that being successful is probably pretty low. But I knew that if they weren't going to change, then it wasn't the right role for me. And I was as excited as I was about the mission and the work, I wasn't going to be satisfied from a career perspective. And so that was okay, I'm not going to take that opportunity. I'm going to go look for something else. So they did give me an offer, but they didn't give me the offer that I wanted, which was more of a leadership role. So I said, no, thank you. So yeah, it's, I don't know where I was going with that, but I do think it's, you have your walk away points. And it can be like, they can just say like, no, we just want someone to push pixels right now. Honestly, there's a lot of businesses that still do need that. Like they need people to come in and produce. And this is one thing I talk about a lot in what I teach, is that companies go through different stages. If you're a tiny startup with 3 people, it's very different than a bigger company with 3,000 people. And what the business needs at different stages is totally different. And so when I talk to people about working at those introduction stage companies, those little tiny startups, everyone's a doer. Everyone's just shipping. And in DoorDash, when I joined, was 8 engineers. So we were just like shipping stuff all the time. There were no PMs. It was just designers and engineers just like, let's do this. Okay, boom, mock-ups, boom, out the door. And it was so fast. And that's what the business needed, was everyone just producing. We're like, we found product market fit. We're going to hit the gas. We want to gain as much market share as possible. We're going to up level our product, and we're just going to get stuff out the door. And that was right for that stage of business. What I think we've seen is maybe some contraction on larger companies now acting like smaller companies and saying like, look, let's cut out like the strategy conversation. We just need to get stuff out the door right now. For the sake of the business, with the competitive market, with all these, the businesses are experiencing AI shift as well. Like all the businesses, everything I feel like we're experiencing personally, like I want to spend less money. I want to be more accountable with my money. I want to spend money on different things. I'm scared about AI. I feel like businesses are doing the same thing on a grander scale because business is just made up of lots of people too. And so you see the business strategy shifting over to AI. And so I think there's a lot of similarities in all of that we're seeing right now.
How does that tie into doing more right now, which is kind of what large companies are trying to make designers do? Is like, let's ship more, ship faster,
Yeah.
experiment.
Thank you for
So,
bringing that thread back for me from my tangent. I think that when we all experience like a major shock, like a macroeconomic shock, and now we're followed up with a technology shock, and it kind of changes the game overnight pretty quickly. Everyone's just scrambling to figure out what this means and what's going on. And so I think we kind of can get focused on, okay, like we need to move in this direction. We're going to lay off a bunch of people that aren't working on AI, hire a bunch of people to work on AI, and then we're just going to like scramble to figure out what this all means and scramble to stay as competitive as we possibly can. And like every company has an AI component to it, or as .ai, or as an AI company, or frames themselves that way to investors like a year after ChatGPT. Like everyone reoriented very quickly.
Right.
Doesn't mean anyone knows what they're doing. They're all still kind of scrambling. And so that's where I think this like startup mentality comes back. It's like, oh crap, like we didn't have any plan for this. And now if we don't have a plan for this, we're not going to be able to raise our next round. So we better all figure this out really quickly. And no one really knows what it is yet. And everyone's trying to figure it out. I think that's very akin to how a startup behaves. And so I think that is to some degree where the also where the kind of lack of design maturity is. You go to these small startups, you're not being design mature often. You're just like shipping stuff out the door. They may have an understanding that designers can do more than that, but they're not able to use designers in that way yet. It's why you don't like hire like a manager to come in when you've got 6 people in the whole company. You just need people to produce. It could also just be that, yeah, you just need people to produce. So maybe it's not just a design thing, but it's a lot of companies are using engineers differently, using PMs differently, perhaps as well.
So from my perspective, and I'm, very much not a shipper anymore. I'm very focused on product strategy or research to drive my decision making across the board, especially as a designer. And when I see what's happening with AI tools and what we're building, like the way we bolt on AI features onto existing products and features, it's abysmal, right? Like on LinkedIn, seeing those AI suggestions of how I want to message people. Like, are you insane? I'm going to spend, one of my email credits are worth like $5 with some crappy AI message or comment with, "Wow, that's so insightful," and none of it is working well. And practically none of the large companies, when it comes to AI adoption, is doing it well, right? And that's clearly from the process of shipping fast as opposed to figuring out what it is that we're trying to do and why we're doing it this way, and then kind of value we're creating for users and for the business. Why are we shifting away from that, especially in areas of great ambiguity and great risk? Because if what you're saying is true, and I agree with you that it is true, there's just so much risk involved currently. And instead of carefully taking a step back and looking at and surveying the entire field and trying to figure out how we can navigate this and not step on, into a hole, we're just kind of like, let's just try everything and see what sticks.
Yeah, I think, I guess let me ask a clarifying question. What do you mean by there's a lot of risk?
Well, right now, if you're a startup, it's really hard to raise money. So if you try to pivot into AI, that's like a safer way. So maybe that's like one way of mitigating your risk. But for many companies, they do need to adopt certain frameworks, because if AI fulfills its promise, then this company might be at great risk, right? Because like one thing that board of directors typically do is
Mhm.
they're not focused on the product strategy even. They're not really focused on what's happening day to day. They're just very much focused on existential risk or
Right.
crises. So things that can irreversibly damage your brand, or if the CEO does something really terrible and dumb, their job is to replace that CEO, vote them out. Or they might control certain resolutions, like do we adopt DEI or get rid of it, right? They probably focus on risk of AI upending their business. So say you're an edtech startup or platform, you're thinking, well, like I'm sure Coursera is thinking this, like this is what AI is most likely going to be. And we're probably at bigger risk than say Airbnb is, because we don't have like Airbnb, you can't use AI to like replace people's bookings or the physical spaces, which is what you're selling. But for Coursera, like you can make the argument that you technically don't need actual people to create courses if the AI is good enough. and
Yeah.
you can replace it with, the current material that we have and just, continuously refine it using AI. And as AI gets better, it's just going to get better and better. You have HeyGen, which is, creating user avatars that are going to be pretty close to you and me on camera pretty soon. And that's like a whole different field altogether. Now you have a real person, somebody that looks like a real person teaching you. So I think as Coursera, you're like, okay, there is a lot of risk going on. And we need
Yeah.
to think about how we want to navigate this, because if AI does fulfill its promise, then in 10 years, we might not have a business anymore.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you're at
If
that
you're a
stage,
startup and you're not doing AI, you're probably not going to get a round of funding, right? And yeah, if you're not kind of exploring this space and investing really quickly to understand it and try to find ways to leverage it, you're probably losing ground on a lot of companies that are.
so why not focus on strategy? And it's odd I'm asking you this because it sounds like you are pretty pro strategy. Like these are the courses that you're teaching,
Mhm.
and you see the value in it. But for whatever reason, our field isn't really adopting that currently.
I don't know. I think it depends on you're talking about like product strategy or business strategy. Like, and it depends on what are the goals of the company. Like, is the goal of the company like having, some of these tools do feel useless, right? So they're not fully baked yet. Are there benefits to people understanding that AI is coming to LinkedIn, or improving, like getting AI plugged into like LinkedIn, for example? Does that get the team some experience working with tools in these ways, starting to ask
Sure.
some of those questions? Are you collecting data that then later you can leverage for bigger, better things? There might be some types of so obviously we talked about fundraising, but your team's going to gain experience, your customers are going to gain familiarity with what you're doing or learn to expect it. You might be gaining some data. So even if like the user experience isn't the best right now, we're still in like a very nascent days. As much as this has taken over all of our worlds, and we talk about it a lot, like the technology is developing very rapidly, but it's still developing, and we're still trying to find like the best use cases for it. So I think what happened is like, Gmail can write your emails for you, or LinkedIn can write posts for you. And that hasn't seemed to be as useful to me personally yet. But everyone's like, okay, this is the first kind of use case we have. Let's try it out and see how it fits. Um, I kind of been thinking about AI as like the internet, right? Everyone just put like .com at the end of their company names, and everyone's like, you're worth more now. And it wasn't really worth anything. And I feel like with the internet, it took a while to figure out what would be really valuable, and streaming, social media, like so many of the things that are really valuable that we use, like Google, all these things came years after the technology was first like introduced, right? It took time to find the use cases, it took time to find the real value. So maybe like AI writing my email to my grandma for me is not particularly useful, but an AI agent that can come in and like know how much food I need to order, has a meal plan for me, and orders my food for me and gets it delivered, and I don't have to think about that anymore, is really useful. That's like a year away or more, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's not wrong that companies are like getting their feet wet, trying these things out, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work for their use cases. They're going to ship things that like, well, that doesn't make any sense, or that's not objectively useful. Should they have not done it because they ran it and they said, they found out it wasn't particularly useful? Like, I don't think that's not strategic. I think there's some strategy in like, I don't know, let's give it a shot and see what happens, because it's such a nascent technology. We're still defining these things, and maybe we learn something as a result of doing this. So
That's true.
that's
It's
how I see
it's
it.
it's ironic that you and I have not worked in AI before, yet we've just talked about it for like a good 20 minutes. So with our
I've been
expert
using it more
thoughts,
and more in my personal life,
yeah,
which has been interesting.
yeah. We just got a donation, Holden Greenberg, as well as anonymous donation. Thank you, folks, so much. Please, folks, if you haven't donated yet, please, hit the donate button or the links in the comments or the QR code. Appreciate any amount possible. The suggested amount is $25. More is always appreciated. Less is appreciated as well. Please donate. Help Tiffany get back on her feet after losing their house in the fire. So thank you so much. Ryan, I feel like we talked through so many things. What do you want to talk about? Like, what do you think is something that we should address in the last like 5 minutes we have left.
Yeah, I was really interested in where the conversation with Debbie landed on upskilling. That was so interesting to me, and I really appreciated her perspective.
Yeah, I think that's so difficult because like Debbie is in a very specific area. Like I think she's in southern Italy, not really close to any of the major metropolitans where tech centers are, and not that Italy really is. I would say a strong, like, has a really strong tech culture. Like, Italy's probably definitely like, nowhere close to say Germany or London when it comes to tech companies, and that makes it very difficult, especially as we return to office. And also, her skill set is primarily focused on non-visual design when during a time when more and more of our jobs have switched over to visual design. So all that together makes it quite difficult. And the way I think about it is, she made a pretty cogent point in that if she were to take visual design courses, does that make her more competitive? I would say to a degree, yes, more competitive, but would it enable her to land a job currently in the field? I would say that remains to be seen. I would probably lean on no, most likely,
Yeah.
given what we've seen on the market and just how difficult it is. But, I didn't really have time to challenge it, but I would say, okay, well, maybe it's not visual design. There are other skill set you can learn to become more hireable because it's not just visual designers who are being hired. You can say conversational designers also have a key role to play in the next few years at least.
Mhm.
And that skill set is, I would say, analogous to user research, strategy, and just being able to design from an information architecture perspective as opposed to just pure visual design.
Yeah, I thought the conversation about upskilling overall was really interesting, and there is like I think it depends on what you're upskilling. I think like to add some nuance to it. I agree that the idea that you can like take a course or a boot camp and be good enough to be hired, I think that was true a few years ago, like with UX boot camps and these types of things where it's like you study design for 8 weeks, cool, you're a designer now, here's a job. And that did happen to people, and now the
Yeah.
bar is higher. So I definitely don't agree. I mean, I agree with Debbie, and I don't think that this is the reality anymore. You can like take a course and go 0 to 1. Be like, well, I'm an accountant and I want to be a designer. So I took one course on Maven. Now I'm a designer and I'm going to get hired. It's like, that is 100% not the case. I'm a huge fan in terms of designers really believing this designers should continue upskilling and things that they have like soften your rough edges. Like if you're already a designer, you're like, my visual design skills are 7 and I want to bring it to a 9. Cool. It's not going to bring you from 0 to 1, but it might bring you from 8 to 9. That might
Yeah.
be enough, right? So like polish those rough edges for sure with learning. I think that's great. I think things that are already like tangentially related to your job, like I'm, teaching on statistics and these like A/B testing, right? Every designer has experienced A/B testing, right? We may not have run it ourselves or calculated the numbers, but we know what it is and we know how it works, but we may not know quite enough about it to participate in a conversation analyzing the data after a test says kill your designs and I want to push back. That's a situation every designer has been through and relates to. And a little bit of upskilling in that specific topic, be like, all right, let's be hyper specific. You've got an A/B test. It says don't launch this thing that you feel really passionately about. How do you push back against the data? Let's talk about stakeholder management. Let's talk about data analysis. Let's talk about other forms of value to the business, and let's expand out. So I think those things that are like adjacent to you, you've experienced before, you don't have the right skills in quite yet, you haven't dove into that quite yet, but it does affect your world, are perfect things to like expand that bubble a little bit. It's not go from one bubble to a totally different bubble. It's make your bubble a little bit larger and go a little bit deeper in those things that you see every day. You're like, I don't know what the success metrics on this project are. I'm just shipping pixels. Probably go talk to your PM and learn what those metrics are. Even upskill just at work, have deeper conversations and show curiosity and ask people. I'm a huge believer in that type of upskilling. I think everyone should be investing in themselves right now. And I think the right courses, I'm not a big fan of like the $12,000 boot camps that'll solve all your problems. I definitely don't think that's the case. It's actually why I like Maven. It's like, go take one class for $500 to $800 that's extremely specific to your specific needs, that's highly rated and well reviewed, and you can make sure it's not full of BS, and you can see that people have actually, it's helped their careers. I think it's a great platform for go get something really specific, really tailored to you that's the right fit for you. And I think everyone should be doing that right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I am so goddamn tired right now. And I'm probably going to take a break soon and watch what Yvonne is live casting in a few minutes. But I want to thank you, Ryan, for coming on as a guest and giving us all this knowledge. And I've learned so much. I definitely want to keep chatting with you. I feel like we always have these really cool back and forths. And we kind of ultimately like set on like the same agreement or same points. So it's pretty cool. Folks who've donated, thank you so much. I know Hope, Holden, and Priska and Andrew, thank you so much, folks, who donated in the last 2 hours. Really appreciate you. This is going to go really far. And it's just so meaningful seeing all the designers come together right now to support the folks who've lost everything in Los Angeles. So, folks, thank you. Keep donating if you haven't already. And we definitely want to see you folks tomorrow. I have another full day of live streams. And tomorrow's going to be killer. Tomorrow's the last day, hopefully. And yeah, it's awesome. Please hit the donate button. And I am losing my voice. So, Ryan, I'll see you around.
All right. Thanks,
All
everyone.
right. Thank you. Take care.